Thank you very much, John. When we called this event, I didn't expect a gang like this one. I know that it is the topic and not the speaker that has commanded your attention and brought you here today. And when I look out into the room and I see so many strong, talented, committed colleagues, I'm glad I didn't follow my instincts. I almost went home and changed into black because it's a dark, devastating, dreary day. But I'm much more comfortable being here with you in blue and gold. And as I look around the room, I hope we have left room for some members of the media, at least. It appears as if most of the places have been claimed by people from Pitt. You know, just last week, the University of Pittsburgh celebrated the 224th anniversary of its founding. It was a time to recognize the accomplishments of students, faculty, staff, and alumni. It also was a time to gratefully reflect on the wisdom of our pioneering predecessors who, well over 2 centuries ago, saw that education was a key to building the future whose promise had brought them to what was then the edge of the American wilderness. We sometimes think that we have big problems in 2011, but compare just for a moment the world of 1787. Today, we complain about potholes. They didn't even have roads. Today, we mourn the loss of airport connections. Their fastest means of transportation was canoe. We bridle at the inefficiencies of modern government while they were working hard to build the basic structures of American democracy. But even in the midst of those tough, some might even say primitive times, our determined predecessors who had nothing material by today's standards did have something that really matters and that is missing from the budget proposal that brings us together today: a commitment to invest in the next generation. In the act of February 28, 1787, establishing the frontier academy that would become the University of Pittsburgh, the Pennsylvania legislature unambiguously declared that the education of youth ought to be a primary object with every government. Those early lawmakers took that position both because they wanted to do the right thing by the young people of the Commonwealth and also from a sense of enlightened self-interest. As our founder, who also played a key role in launching the region's first newspaper, so I know some of you will pay attention to his words, said, "We well know that the strength of a state greatly consists in the superior mental powers of its inhabitants." Fast forward 224 years, 1 week and 1 day. Today, March 8th, 2011, is another date that may long be remembered in the history of higher education in Pennsylvania. However, it will be remembered in a far less positive way because earlier today our governor released a proposed budget that contains stunningly deep cuts to the support that has long been provided to public higher education. From what we have been able to tell after a quick first look at that proposal, the cuts included for Pitt include a 50% or $80 million reduction to our general education appropriation, funds that are used mainly to support the education of the next generation of Pennsylvanians. The complete elimination of nearly $17 million of support for programs in the health sciences, including our top-ranked School of Medicine, the Western Psychiatric Institute and Clinic, our dental clinic, and our Center for Public Health Practice. The apparent loss of annual biomedical research support competitively awarded of more than $9 million each year from the Tobacco Settlement Fund, and the anticipated loss of $7.5 million of stimulus funding. Sparing you the need to do the math and recognizing that there may be adjustments to make when we have the chance to fully study this proposal, Pitt has been targeted for cuts in excess of $110 million. Similar reductions have been proposed for Penn State and Temple, Pennsylvania's two other public research universities, and Lincoln, the nation's oldest historically black college. The fiscal assault on this group of four, collectively known as the state-related universities, also extends to the universities of the state system of higher education and can be viewed in many ways. In practical terms, the proposed cuts are a renunciation of the commitment made by the Commonwealth to Pennsylvania families with college-age children in the mid-1960s, when Pitt and Temple, followed later by Lincoln, joined Penn State as state-related universities. That earlier action was driven by the belief that creating larger numbers of reasonably priced but high-quality university opportunities was not only critical to the aspirations of the daughters and sons of Pennsylvania, but was a key to our collective long-term well-being. In fact, the drive to keep bright Pennsylvanians in Pennsylvania might be viewed as an early preemptive strike against what we now call the brain drain. The proposed cuts also visibly reinforce an all too common and ultimately self-defeating characteristic of state funding, that excellence and impact are seldom rewarded. The universities that are so heavily penalized under this proposal not only make unique contributions at the local, regional, and statewide level, but stand out for the national and international recognition they have earned for the quality of their programs. They provide undergraduate, graduate, and professional education in areas of particular need, including science, math, and engineering. One measure of the success of the state-related universities is that we now enroll more than 150,000 Pennsylvania students, more than any other sector of higher education. Obviously, this kind of success is not being rewarded. The proposed cuts also represent a puzzling retreat from the governor's own economic agenda, which had emphasized the development of competitive advantages in the emerging innovation economy and placed a high priority on nurturing a business climate that fosters job creation. In fact, in his address today, he described that agenda in 3 words: jobs, jobs, jobs. Research universities, of course, are key centers of innovation, major employers in their own right, a frequent source of support for large numbers of other regional jobs, and generators of the ideas that spawn new companies that generate even more jobs. In this region, in fact, the education and health services sector not only is the largest employment supersector, to use a term of art employed by the Federal Department of Labor, but is the only sector to have consistently added jobs over the course of the past 15 years. It is the sector that helped shield this region from the starkest impacts of the recession. UPMC and the University of Pittsburgh already are the two largest employers in this region, and both have demonstrated their capacity for further growth. Pitt now annually attracts nearly $800 million in support for research projects, well over $4 of outside research support for every $1 of its appropriation. It is unlikely that any other Commonwealth investment comes close to matching that level of return. And to return to the jobs theme, applying standard national conventions, $800 million in research spending directly and indirectly supports more than 28,000 local jobs. Presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama are not known to have agreed on many things, but both were so impressed with the transformation of the Western Pennsylvania economy that they wanted to share the news about it with others. During a visit to Pitt in 2002, President Bush declared that while Pittsburgh used to be called the Steel Town, it now should be called Knowledge Town. And in choosing Pittsburgh as the site for the 2009 G20 summit, President Obama said, "Pittsburgh stands as a bold example of how to create new jobs and industries while transitioning to a 21st century economy. As a city that has transformed itself from a city of steel to a center of high-tech innovation, including green technology, education and training, and research and development, Pittsburgh will provide both a beautiful backdrop and a powerful example for our work." In his inaugural address, Governor Corbett sounded similar themes, praising industry rooted in innovation, foreseeing a future for Pennsylvania that embraces innovation in emerging frontiers of energy, life sciences, and biotechnology, and expressing his own belief that the best way to embrace innovation, the best way to make us competitive, is to make us competitive in education. Today's budget proposal, on the other hand, targets the very institutions that are exemplars of innovation, acknowledged leaders in such areas as energy, life sciences, and biotechnology, and internationally respected providers of the highest quality higher education. In his inaugural address, the governor also praised, as an example of Pennsylvania's tradition of character and courage, the single mother who works an extra job so that she can send her children to a better school. Under today's budget reduction proposal, though, the Commonwealth essentially abandons that single mother and countless other Pennsylvania parents, leaving them to deal with the large tuition increases that inevitably will result from these massive reductions in support for public higher education. And if we celebrate the sacrifices made by that single mother to advance her next generation, how can we be so comfortable adding to her burdens and to the burdens of others in that collective expression of values known as government? Let me make clear that I have known and respected Governor Corbett for many years. Not only do I wish him well in his new office, but am eager, as he knows, to support him in forging new forms of progress for Pennsylvania. And to state the obvious, developing a plan to close a multi-billion-dollar budget gap is a difficult responsibility that will take help. Still, I can hardly stand before you today without respectfully, but also clearly and forcefully questioning the choices upon which this budget proposal has been built. These are choices that will make it far harder for the young people of Pennsylvania to use the power of education to build better lives. These are choices that will put a real financial squeeze on Pennsylvania families, often still reeling from the effects of the Great Recession. These are choices that will impede this region's economic recovery. And these are choices that make it less likely that Pennsylvania as a state will compete and thrive in the 21st century. It may be true that there are few good choices available when one is faced with the task of closing such a sizable budget deficit. However, in times of crisis, it is especially important that the best possible choices be made. And in the forward-looking traditions that have made this country what it is, the very highest priority should be given to securing the future for generations yet to come. To be absolutely clear, the University of Pittsburgh stands ready, as it always has, to accept its fair share of the sacrifice that will be required to rein in this deficit. Evidence of that fact can be found in the existing record. Certainly, Pitt is no stranger to budget reductions or even to disproportionate treatment, with its appropriation having been cut in 6 of the last 10 years. And we have made operational efficiency a long-term priority, which is reflected in staged actions like budget cuts, the redesign of benefit plans, cost reduction initiatives, and successful efforts to increase levels of productivity. It also is reflected in our necessary responses to unwelcome and unanticipated economic realities like the salary freezes of not too many years ago. Pitt also knows something about positively shaping the future. In that same 10-year period, the faculty of the University of Pittsburgh attracted $5.33 billion in outside research support and earned national and international recognition for their achievements in such wide-ranging areas as organ transplantation, research into the causes of cancer and Alzheimer's disease, rehabilitation science, mathematics, philosophy, history, and poetry, just to name a few. Pitt alumni were honored with such special forms of recognition as the Nobel Peace Prize, the Nobel Prize in Medicine, the National Medal of Science, the Pulitzer Prize in Fiction, the Fritz Medal in Engineering, and the Albany Prize in Medicine. Perhaps most important, in that same decade, 76,000 new Pitt degrees were awarded to students in Pittsburgh, Bradford, Greensburg, Johnstown, and Titusville. Students using the power of education to elevate their own lives and to position themselves to make contributions to their communities. It is those now following in their footsteps, or hoping to follow in their footsteps, that stand to suffer the greatest personal disadvantage from the deep budget cuts that have been proposed. In a very real sense, though, we all will be losers. Customarily, the public release of today's proposal would mark the beginning of a relatively extended process through which its recommendations would be considered, discussed, and in some instances improved upon. Hopefully that will remain the case through this year's budget cycle. Certainly we will welcome any opportunity to work with the governor's team and with members of the legislature as that process moves forward. In doing so, we will do our best to represent the interests of our students and their families and of the many communities that we serve. We also will work to maintain our momentum as an engine of economic development and as an important source of the people, ideas, and programs that make Pennsylvania stronger today and that will help shape a better future for those who follow. I appreciate your listening to me, and I would be pleased to respond to questions.
Again, please give your name and the news organization you represent for each question.
Chancellor Nordenberg, Deborah Erdley with the Pittsburgh Trib. You were on the governor's transition team on education. Did you have any inkling that he was considering cuts this steep?
I'll answer that question in two parts because I think it is important, given the premise of your question, to understand the assignment. The transition team really had a charge to focus on short-term issues that would make the handoff between administrations smoother and more productive. We did not have any role in shaping a long-term policy in our areas of responsibility for the new administration. Now, to get to the heart of your question, no, I had no idea that cuts of this magnitude would be envisioned by the governor, period. Bill?
You mentioned, you made a reference earlier.
Could you please
Could you repeat that name?
To a renunciation of the state-related concept. If Pitt absorbs a cut in its appropriation this size, can it continue as a state-related university, and can you continue to offer an in-state tuition subsidy essentially for Pennsylvania students with that deep of a cut?
Well, again, I'm going to answer that in two stages if I can. First, we always have embraced our status as a state-related university. We recognize and have made clear in a wide range of venues that we have not been supported at levels that one might find for public universities in other states. Still, we always have made clear that we have valued our partnership with the Commonwealth, and I think that is reflected in the nature of the institution, in our programs, and in our community commitments. We do, in fact, accept the highest percentage of our students from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We do, in fact, place the largest number of our graduates within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and I suspect that number would be even higher if the opportunities had been present here. So to be clear, the University of Pittsburgh is not seeking to retreat from this relationship. If that relationship has now been called into question, it is only by the announced actions by the governor today, these proposed cuts that would take our level of support to historically low levels. And you probably can rattle off these numbers yourself, Bill, but you know, I came to the law faculty in the 1970s. In the mid-1970s, the Commonwealth appropriation represented 30% of the university's operating budget. By the time I became acting or interim chancellor, that number had fallen to less than 20% of the university's budget. In the current year, it's less than 10% of the university's budget, and if the governor's proposal was to be accepted, we would fall beneath 5% last year. When you reach that level, then I think there are a new range of questions to ask. And I think the short answer to your second question is no. If you're not funded like a public university, it's difficult to maintain the traditional programs of a public university. The basic agreement between the Commonwealth and the University of Pittsburgh in 1966 was that we would maintain a lower tuition level for in-state students than the tuition we had been charging as the private university we had been for nearly 200 years at that point in time. And the Commonwealth would provide an appropriation that would enable us to do so. We clearly have met our end of that bargain. There is a significant difference in the tuition levels that we currently charge for in-state and out-of-state students. At the undergraduate level in arts and sciences, it would be close to $10,000. More significantly, because again, this is the context in which the relationship was created, our in-state undergraduate tuition is about $14,000, which is about a third of peer private universities. Obviously, if the Commonwealth is to decide that it no longer includes as a priority supporting that lower tuition structure for in-state students, it would be difficult for us to maintain it alone. Yeah.
Mr. Nordenberg, Jane Ellen Robinette, in the Chronicle. Two questions. I'm wondering what will happen with capital spending projects that are ongoing in light of this proposed budget, and will there be any layoffs?
Well, what I want to do first is to say, as you would expect, I really don't know. But I'll try to provide a bit more context than that. We again now are, what, about 3 hours after the conclusion of the governor's budget address. We haven't even had a chance to go through that big binder that includes his complete plan. And our first item of business is to try to make certain that it is modified in ways that are sensible for the university, sensible for our students, sensible for their families, sensible for the region and its communities, and sensible for the Commonwealth. Obviously, the prospect of cuts of this size almost means that everything has got to be on the table, but beyond that, it's difficult to say what actions or combinations of actions might in the end prove to be the best response to the budget if it should move forward as proposed. But really there are a couple of other things that I want to say about your question. First, when we entered what now is called the Great Recession, we did hold back on construction projects. We just put things on hold. We believed that was the most prudent thing that we could do. But what people don't realize is that's not a good thing for Western Pennsylvania. When we're building things or renovating things or remodeling things, we're supporting the job base that the governor has said he wants to grow in the Commonwealth. And if you look around this region, we are an engine of economic activity in that regard as well. And through those investments in our physical plant, we really are supporting the jobs of people who otherwise have no connection to the University of Pittsburgh and who very likely would be out of work or working in some way other than the job that is their chosen trade. You know, the same is true when you talk about layoffs. And one of the things that always leads me to shrug my shoulders and roll my eyes is the notion that you're not effectively managing your organization unless you've laid people off. Well, you know, think about the transformation of the University of Pittsburgh. The truth is, we're not an organization that has had trouble sustaining demand for the services that it provides. Again, from 1995 to the current time, we've more than tripled our research funding. You know, we built that big building for Dr. Levine there on Fifth Avenue, and he filled it just like that. We have 6,000 more students at the university than we had in 1995. And in order to maintain the quality of what we do, whether that's in research or that's in education, we need adequate numbers of good, talented, committed people, and we have been blessed with having them. And it is those people, through their own employment and through the revenues that they import and the spending that they do, that we also contribute to a broader employment base within the region. So, you know, my view as we went through the recession, for example, was that first, making layoffs the lowest possible priority was the humane thing to do. Second, making layoffs the lowest possible priority made good business sense for the University of Pittsburgh, which faced increasing demands for its services. And third, that increasing employment levels at the University of Pittsburgh was important for the overall health of the economy of Western Pennsylvania. Now, with cuts like this, again I'm saying, Jane Ellen, everything's on the table, but we have a history that suggests certain alternatives are not good for us. They would not be good for our students. They would not be good for the consumers of our research, and they would not be good for the region. And wouldn't it be ironic in a situation in which jobs is listed as the #1 economic development priority, if spending policies in effect had the impact of undermining the very forms of economic growth and job generation that again have been a hallmark of the region through these difficult times.
Mr. Chancellor, Elaine for KQB Radio. Wondering what you might advise to students at the University of Pittsburgh who might be outraged by these budget cuts and the impact that it will have on them and their tuition and their ability to go to this university. What would you advise to them? Should they say, you know, maybe we should march on Harrisburg or protest? Would you discourage them? What would you advise them to do in terms of their reaction to this proposal?
Well, I would never advise them with respect to specific tactics, but I would say that they clearly have a strong and deep interest in the actions that have been proposed today. We did hear the governor today indicating that he and other elected officials need to be responsible to their constituent groups. And you know, when you add up 150,000 Pennsylvania students enrolled in the state-related universities, and I think maybe another 110 or 120,000 enrolled in the state system of higher education, and then you add to those student numbers the voices of parents, it is a potentially powerful force in terms of the discussions yet to come. So again, I want to make clear, Elaine, I'm not suggesting that anybody march anywhere, but I am saying that we live in a democracy where people making their voices heard is not only an accepted part of the tradition, but really is an essential feature of representative government. And I suspect that with the quality of students we have here at the University of Pittsburgh, they probably don't need me to tell them that. Yes, sir.
Joe H. Pittman Magazine. Pitt does provide a lot of services, a big amount of safety net for a lot of people in this region. Legal services, medical services, dental services. What kind of impact might these cuts have on these things at the university?
Well, you know, again, it's hard for me to know today, but I'm going to make a brief comment, and then there may be people who can provide better answers. I mean, when you look at an appropriation for a dental clinic, I mean, you know that that is a provider of important services to people who might not otherwise be able to obtain them. Or you look at the loss of an appropriation supporting the work of Western Psychiatric Institute and Clinic. Yeah, I really don't claim any expertise in these things, but my layperson's perspective is that the reduction in services that used to be provided through other institutions actually already has put a far greater demand on a place like Western Psychiatric Institute and Clinic. And now to see those funds leaving, it does raise real concerns. And I do see Dean Braun is here, the Dean of the Dental School, and Dr. Levine is here, the Dean of the Medical School. I don't know if either of you would like to add anything.
Sure.
No, I would simply say that our lowest priority would be to cut our services to our patients. But having said that, it will be inescapable that there will be some effect on services because, using the example of Western Psychiatric, that particular appropriation includes some monies for clinical services as well as academics. So with a cut of that magnitude, that is a complete cut, I think it's inevitable that there will be some, at the very least, small effect on our ability to provide patient care.
Bill?
Yeah, just a question. I was wondering what went through your mind today as you heard the governor, on the one hand, preserve the tax credit for the filmmaking industry on the idea that it brings dollars into the state, and yet the university's appropriation was severely cut. And also, I'm wondering, would you be in favor of a tax on the Marcellus shale industry if it would be funded back to universities?
Both of those are good questions that will be carefully answered. And looking at me, Bill, you know that I'm really not much of a movie maker or an oil man, so I take no position with respect to the tax credit for filmmaking, except to underscore the observation that was built into your question. If you want to look at magnets attracting dollars from outside of the Commonwealth that are spent in the Commonwealth for the good of the people of the Commonwealth, it would be hard to find anything that compares with the power of the research universities. So that if that is the logical predicate for the continuation of that tax credit, then it would seem to apply many times over in the case of public higher education. With respect to the Marcellus shale, I'll only say that I do have ideas about how budgets could be balanced and would be glad to share those ideas with the governor if he chose to ask me. But I don't want to be presumptuous, so I think I'll restrict my remarks to higher education generally. John.
How much would this large tuition increase be?
Well, it is hard to say now, John. And I do want to make clear that we would do everything that we can to keep that increase within manageable ranges. We do have a commitment to our students. We do believe in access to higher education. We don't want this to be an institution that is affordable only for the well-to-do. Many of us who are here in more senior positions today would not have been able to pursue the educations that we received if that was the way that the world worked. On the other hand, we've maintained a big difference. I mean, if I say again that the undergraduate tuition differential in arts and sciences is between $9,000 and $10,000, and half of the money that ostensibly is used to support that differential is being taken away, that's a sizable loss of revenues for us. Hi, Kim.
I was wondering, given that there's going to be a gap of about $80 million to fill, more or less, depending on where this lands when the budget bill is finally decided upon, will there be any changes in terms of how that combination of factors is going to be decided here at Pitt, in terms of who makes the decision of what's going to happen to fill that gap?
Yeah, I actually think that one of the advantages that we have in terms of process is that we do have an established university planning and budgeting system. And way back when, I don't know, 20 or so years ago, I was one of the negotiators from the dean side in the function or the crafting of that system, and then was one of the first people to chair the UPBC during my year as interim provost. So ultimately, I guess the responsibility will rest with me and with members of my senior team. But we do now have a university planning and budgeting committee at the top of the university planning and budgeting system that has been a well-developed model of shared governance, and I expect that we would make use of that structure rather than creating something new.
So you're saying there'll be no increased participation from faculty and staff, such as maybe what Penn State had done in terms of looking at places to serve?
Well, I don't know exactly what Penn State did, but I'm not putting together a new commission, which in some ways almost would be disrespectful, I think. We do have an agreed upon set of processes and procedures to follow. And again, you know, who knows? 2 weeks from now, we may say there is something else we ought to do, and that may lead to the consideration of a new approach. But I think it is important to underscore the fact that sensible, responsible budget building and cost-effective operations have been characteristics of the University of Pittsburgh now for a considerable period of time. Remember, we're facing a huge, surprising proposal for reductions today. But again, we've had budgets reduced 6 of the last 10 years. We've had mid-year reductions. We've had normal budget cycle reductions, and the system seems to have worked quite well to this point.